I've always enjoyed being behind a camera of some kind. It's an obsession that goes back to the summer of 1987 when I got my first camera. This little guy probably cost my parents no more than $3 or $4 at this gift shop, and I'm sure they thought it was nothing more than a throwaway purchase that would keep me busy during our vacation. As soon as we got back to the motel, I ripped into that package and started snapping. And based on the shots that came out of that first roll of film, it would seem I was all in on the parking lot aesthetic. What am I even doing here? I did nail this one though. You gotta admit, that's not bad for an 8-year-old. Anyway, my point is that while I've only been doing this professionally for a short time, I've been doing it for my own enjoyment for a really long time. And by the grace of God, that's opened a lot of doors for me. Okay. When you love what you do, people seem to notice. And ever since content creation became my main source of income, I've gotten to do some really fun stuff with some really fun people. In that time, I filmed a marriage proposal, several weddings, some small business promos, some fun stuff for social media, quirky real estate listing videos, interviews, and a lot of other stuff too. I've gotten really good at shooting real estate photography and enhancing that photography using AI. AI is also a lot of fun to use the wrong way, so I put a couple of my old childhood photos through their paces here. This one horrifies my parents. That's just funny. But as fun as all of those things are, I still think my favorite type of media to capture is 360-degree photography for 3D tours on Zillow. These virtual tours work a lot like Google Street View, and they're so satisfying to click around and explore. They're a great way to instill extra confidence in potential home buyers by giving them a more thorough sense of space. The property you're seeing here is a great example of that. See how this front door looks like it's going to take you straight into this home's foyer or maybe into the living room? Instead, it leads you into this really cool courtyard, where you then decide if you want to enter the pool house / in-law suite to your left, or into one of the various areas of the house through one of these sets of sliding glass doors. The 3D tour provides immediate clarity by allowing you to see how all of these areas connect to one another. In fact, the listing agent for this property just called me after her open house a few days ago to say that an interested buyer went so far as to tell her that the 3D tour they saw on Zillow was what sealed the deal for them and motivated them to come take a look in person. Zillow claims that listings that include 3D tours receive up to 87% more views. They say that those properties tend to sell 10 to 14% faster, and that the listing agents are 94% more likely to be contacted by prospective buyers. So in this video, I want to show you why I think these are so much fun to capture, as well as how I go the extra mile for my clients to ensure that they get maximum value. Because ultimately, I exist to help them move their marketing forward, and I want the tours I capture to be as helpful as possible. So I mentioned Google Street View earlier, which is ironic because the property in this example is a brand new build. When I tried to look it up online to scout the location before I drove out there, I found that the most recent photos were taken in September of 2024, before the land had even been cleared for this home to be built. Now, put yourself in the shoes of a prospective buyer who tried to do their research beforehand. You go online, find a house that you like, and decide to go see it for yourself. You Google the address, which naturally leads you into checking what the neighborhood around the house looks like. But you can't get a read on it because Google's photos predate the home's existence. But if Zillow has a 3D tour available, and a media capture like me has done his job well, there will be a photo from the driveway or street in front of the house that can help fill those informational gaps. Yes, I know that the lack of an updated Google Street View photo probably isn't going to cause anyone to pass on a property that they're genuinely interested in. But from a marketing perspective, why wouldn't you try to tear down as many barriers as possible? It's just another ingredient that kind of rounds out the recipe. I'll use this tripod when I'm shooting the interiors, but it's a little windy out, so I also brought my telescoping selfie stick and ground spike for when I shoot the exteriors. This is a newly constructed property on ground that was cleared fairly recently, so it should be nice and soft. Using the ground spike will prevent the wind from blowing the tripod over and damaging my camera. To get started, I launched the Zillow 3D Homes app on my phone. The connection to the camera can be kind of squirrely, but the main takeaway is that you need to connect to the camera as if it's a Wi-Fi hotspot. Of course, the camera has no native ability to provide the phone with internet connectivity, so it can wreak havoc with the uploads of the images I'm about to capture. My phone will ignore the unusable Wi-Fi network and upload via 5G, but the images are fairly large and mobile networks don't have great upload speeds anyway. So the Zillow 3D Homes app tends to just kind of hold the images in a cache. A 360 camera sees everything, so you're always going to be in your own shot. You can't simply edit yourself out because these images are going to be uploaded directly to Zillow, so you just have to find a good hiding spot, which kind of makes you feel like you're getting away with something sneaky and exciting. Once I'm safely out of the shot, I'll trigger the camera remotely using the shutter button on the app. I'm listening for the click of the camera on the tripod. As I'm walking back to the tripod to set it up for the next capture, I'll give the Zillow 3D Homes app the name of the area I just snapped. I'll call this one driveway, but front yard can work too. This is something that can be changed either while you're on site at the property or once you get home to complete your edits on the computer. I knew my next few outdoor shots were going to occur on uneven ground, and as I mentioned earlier, there was a healthy little springtime breeze on the day of the shoot, so I'm going to switch over to the ground spike for stability. I've already ruined one 360 camera by underestimating the wind. Now I'm all done outside, so I've switched back to the tripod. There was a lot of red mud out there, so I'm going to make sure I don't bring any of it in by taking off my shoes and washing it all off my ground spike. I always perform a good, thorough sweep of a property before I start shooting to make sure all the lights are turned on and the toilet seats and lids are down. I couldn't turn on the lights in a couple of these rooms though. I don't think the ceiling fans have bulbs installed yet. But with everything now safely out of my shot, I'll capture the view from the front entrance. This is a smaller home with a really open floor plan. The entrance sort of leads into the living room, which leads into the dining area and then the kitchen. I don't normally capture two shots that are this physically close to one another, but I'm thinking ahead to the editing process. It would be pretty strange if the tour didn't have a clickable arrow named living room, so I'm just sort of arbitrarily creating one here. This hallway shot isn't going to be particularly interesting, but it's one of the most important shots to make sure to capture. This will sort of function as the center point of the property, and I'll add in multiple arrows to each of these rooms that will help to properly orient anyone who ends up looking at this property online. Now this feels like a good time to point out something I sort of blew past earlier in the video, which is that each time you start a tour, you can select either virtual tour only or virtual tour and floor plan. I always choose the option with the floor plan because what's going to happen is that once you upload all your images and finalize the tour, Zillow's AI will interpret all of those images and create a really nice floor plan for you. The only caveat is that any rooms with closets or doors that lead into, say, half baths will need to be captured twice, once with those doors closed and another time with the doors open. This way the AI can examine the images and say, oh, that's a closet, or oh, that's a bathroom, and can generate that floor plan accordingly. Failing to open those doors will force it to have to guess, and it's almost certainly going to guess wrong. A property I shot last year had a door in the foyer that led to a half bath, which I forgot to open. The AI interpreted it as a closet, and that's not something that Zillow's software will allow you to edit, at least in the current iteration of this program. I emailed their support to see if it could be corrected, but they are notoriously unresponsive, and I unsurprisingly got ghosted. I had to go back to the property a week later and shoot the half bath I missed, as well as the second shot of the foyer with the bathroom door open. The good news is that once I uploaded those shots, Zillow's AI reinterpreted that area and corrected it in pretty short order. I think it only took a couple of hours if I remember correctly. The rest of the process is just more of the same. Move the tripod, hide from the tripod, snap the photo, do it again in the next area. And whenever possible, make sure the camera isn't catching sight of itself in a mirror. It's not the end of the world if there's no way around it, but it's usually something that's easy enough to avoid with a little creative positioning. The last thing I'm going to need to do before I move over to the computer to edit everything I've captured is to click Finish so that Zillow can begin compiling my tour and floor plan. But this is where the connectivity quirks I mentioned earlier in the video now come into play. On the first few 3D tours I captured for clients, this is the phase where I would enter full-on freakout mode. I remember specifically at one property, the staging area I used for all my gear had been a half bathroom near the front door. The battery on my phone was almost dead, I had almost no cell service, and the upload status of every single 360 image I had just captured was stuck at 0%. I closed the bathroom door so that I could hyperventilate in private, but both the realtor and the homeowner had to leave, and I was delaying their departure. I felt like, be right out! What I didn't understand at the time was the fact that the amount of data that needed to be uploaded just wasn't possible due to the low signal strength on my phone, so the app was in kind of a holding pattern. I've done some of these tours in homes where the cell service is robust enough to handle the upload, but more often than not, I know I'm just going to have to wait until I get home. Without fail, once my phone is connected to Wi-Fi and I'm no longer dependent on cell service, the uploads go off without a hitch. So all of these super scary looking error messages aren't really as big of a deal as they seem in the moment. Now for the final step, which I guess maybe some would consider optional. Zillow's AI is pretty good at knowing where your camera captured each shot, what it captured, and where to position the arrows that point to each area. But it only gets you maybe 70 or 80% of the way to a coherent tour. If we were to stop right here, arrows might have the wrong names attached to them, they might point the wrong direction. All the images would be findable though, so maybe that's good enough for some, but I don't know how to do 70 or 80% of a good job, so let's just put on the finishing touches. When you open up the desktop version after finalizing the tour from your phone, you'll find that the custom names you assign to some of your areas have been changed. This one that says front yard was supposed to have been side yard right. I like to give every shot its own name as it makes the arrows easier to customize. So before I go any further, I'm going to rename it to what helps me remember where to orient the arrow. This one is all kinds of wrong. There's no arrow that points to the primary bedroom, and the other two bedrooms are just marked bedroom, which is technically correct. But again, if I'm an interested home buyer and I'm trying to browse an online tour, I know I'm going to want something to help me differentiate one from the other. Anyway, we'll correct the missing primary bedroom pointer by first identifying the corresponding photo in the carousel down here, which again is made that much more difficult to navigate by the fact that Zillow renamed all 3 bedrooms the same thing. Now it's easier to tell what room we're in. Now it's much easier to tell which pointer we need to add because it's actually named bedroom primary. That just makes a lot more sense to me. You'll sometimes notice you've got some wonky lines and some of the lines that should be straight. That's just an artifact of the 360 camera, I guess. And it's just one of those things you kind of have to live with. There's no opportunity to edit any of this stuff. The images just are what they are on the day that you capture them. And we've got a missing pointer here in the kitchen. The hallway is visible, but there is no pointer, so we are going to add that. And then I want the living room arrow pointed more at the area where I actually put the tripod when I captured the image. So I'll just move that. And that's it. We now have a completed 3D tour that makes sense. The pointers accurately show you your way around the house. You've got a nice little floor plan over here. It's important to note that this does not replace getting measurements professionally recorded, but it is a nice little visual tool that makes the listing feel complete. But anyway, if you're still here, I really appreciate you watching. This one was a lot of fun to do and a lot of work to edit. So if you watched all the way to this point, I want to let you know how much I truly appreciate that.